Alright guys, beautiful day for a review. Today we're going to be looking at the Kiprun Evadict MT2 Trail shoe. This is a shoe that I picked up from Decathlon. For those of you that don't know what Decathlon is, it's a sporting goods store, started in Europe, has slowly progressed over into North America. There's one here in Calgary. Traditionally in the past I've worn the Saucony Peregrine and an Innovate shoe as my trail shoes. I use these shoes for both trail running and hiking. I prefer more of the low top as opposed to the mid for hiking, and I find a trail shoe is usually a little bit lighter weight than what a hiking boot would be. So that's typically why I find I like more of a trail shoe. But I've used this shoe both trail running and hiking, and I wanted to give it a review since many of you might not be familiar with this shoe at all, and it might be an good option for you to pick up. It was only $100, so that's kind of what intrigued me with this shoe. I tried it on, I was like, oh, it's decently comfortable. Let's see what happens. And here we are. Let's start with some specs. So it's got an 8mm drop on it. Midsole is made out of Kalensole, which is just an EVA material that Kiprun has. They do have what they call a K-ring underneath the heel. Think of it as a Nike Air Zoom pod, but in just a ring as opposed to like the more pillow that they have in the Nikes, but just a ring just to increase the cushioning. And then actually under the first metatarsal, so your big toe, they have increased the density of the foam by 15%. And Kiprun calls this their K-only technology, which they say, okay, this is good for any foot type, which is kind of different than some other footwear branding, right? Other shoes, they'll say, okay, we got a neutral shoe, we got a a motion control shoe, and we have all these other different types, like now they're getting these neutral but control shoes. There's so many different types of options now out there. But what Kiprun is saying is, no matter your foot type, this shoe is going to work for you. Which, based on this research paper, is kind of why they say this. So, this is done out of a Luxembourg study, so Decathlon funded this research by Laurent Missot et al., and this was published in 2016. What this study was looking at, I'm just going to give you guys the cliff notes of it to say whether or not what Decathlon and Kiprun is claiming is true. They looked at the injury risk in runners. They've separated, I believe it was about 350 runners into two groups in this randomized control trial. One group just wore a neutral shoe. The other group wore this neutral motion control shoe for 6 months, and they used these shoes for every one of their runs. What they did for motion control was they put more, they put a polyurethane coating on the medial aspect, under the medial arch, and then they also did this where they increased the density by 15% under that first metatarsal, and seeing if that had a decrease in injury reduction. What they found was there actually was a risk ratio reduction of 0.54 in the group that used this motion control shoe as opposed to the neutral shoe if you had a pronated foot type, and they measured that statically. So there you go. That's actually contradictory to a couple other studies that they cite in this paper, and that I've looked at too. The other studies that they looked at were in a military population and then in a female-only population, that they found that if you say prescribe footwear, oh, you have a neutral foot, we'll give you a neutral shoe, or oh, you have a little bit of a pronated foot, let's get you in a motion control shoe, that there is no difference in injury risk. In this study, they actually found that there was. So, to my knowledge, that information is yet to be repeated. So, I'm not quite sure exactly what happened. And they actually state in this paper that they didn't measure any biomechanical analysis or anything like that. So, the reason why there was that injury reduction, they're not too sure about, but they did find it. And actually, both of the populations in the control group and this motion control group were very similar. The characteristics between the group were very similar. What they didn't find was any risk reduction in if you had a neutral foot type or if you had a supinated foot type in that static posture. But they didn't find that there was an increased risk reduction. So I think that's where they're coming at, claiming, okay, this technology that we have is okay for anyone, but is it any better for you that if you say you have a neutral foot or if you have a supinated foot? Maybe not. And who knows if it is actually better for you if you do have that pronated foot type, because the results haven't been repeated. So once those results are repeated a few times, then maybe let's talk about prescribing footwear based on your foot type. Next, Decathlon lists this at 310 grams at a US size 8. This is a 9.5. So let's measure this here. I got my scale. It's coming in at 317.4 grams. So only an extra 7 grams for a size and a half, which is actually not that much more. That's surprising. Reasons why it's a little bit on the heavier side, and most trail shoes are a little bit on the heavier side, is they do have this reinforced toe cap, this reinforced heel counter, and then obviously they have more rubber on the bottom, right, with all these lugs. Getting into the outsole, they do have a 5mm lug on the bottom, and it's pretty much all rubberized, so it's fairly protective. There isn't much of a rock plate on this shoe, and I'll get more talking about that when I talk about the ride, but just to let you guys know. And then the upper. It's just a traditional mesh upper. Like I had mentioned, they do have some reinforcement in a few different places, which is nice and helps with the durability of the shoe. Yeah. Let's talk about how I rate this shoe. So, first talking about durability. So I've been wearing this shoe for about 4 months now, and have really thought that it's held up really nicely. There's been no separation between the midsole and the outsole, and the upper has stayed, there's no holes or anything like that. And I have, say, tripped over some roots out trail running, or kicked some rocks and that kind of stuff, and no issues with the durability there. I would give these guys an 8.5 out of 10 so far on the durability. I could change that number if I'm using it for a little bit longer. Like I said, I have about 4 months on it. So we'll see what happens when it gets more to that 6, 7, 8 months, how it's still holding up. But so far, I've really liked how it's kept all the features. So like I said, there's none of the lugs are missing or anything like that. Nothing like that's fallen off, or no cracking or anything. So yeah, happy with that. Next, let's talk about the fit. So I give these guys a 7 out of 10 on the fit. Fairly or unfairly, there's a few reasons why I took some points away that don't necessarily relate to myself. So I actually really like the fit of this shoe. It's got a little bit of a wider toe box. Feel like my feet can sort of spread out. My toes can spread out, especially when you're descending or climbing up some different scrambles and stuff. And you need a little bit of a wider base. I felt this shoe was able to give me that. No slipping at the heel. Haven't noticed any heel rubbing or blisters. I've worn this. The longest I've probably worn this is 6 hours on the trail. And yeah, didn't feel like I wanted to take it off as soon as I got out of the trail, other than maybe being a little bit wet. But some reasons why I took some points away is, one, it only comes in a men's shoe. Decathlon doesn't make this in a women's version. They do make trail shoes, but they are a different shoe. I was looking a little bit, and they have a 10 mil drop on their women's version, and it does have a different upper and outsole. So it is a different shoe, so I can't really compare it. The other reason I took points away is it just comes in the standard width. They don't make it in a 2E or a 4E width, so not going to be the best fit for you if you do have a little bit of a wider foot. Go look somewhere else. But overall, for my foot, it feels good. No lace bite at all. The tongue is a little bit thicker, and they do actually have this nice pouch in it too. So when you do tie up the laces, you can stick it in there so they don't get stuck on any rocks or roots or anything like that. And what I've really liked about it is when you do lace up the shoe, it stays laced. You could even just single knot this shoe, and the laces are great. You don't even have to worry about them coming undone. Especially, that's nice peace of mind while you are trail running, just in case you're going down a section and you don't. That's the last thing you want is your shoe to come off, right? Next, let's move on to the traction. So I give these guys an 8.5 out of 10 for traction. The lugs, being 5 mil, are significant enough to, I've taken it through mud, snow, really dusty trails, up scree, up some scrambles, down some shale and that kind of stuff, and haven't slipped out once. Knock on wood. Hopefully that doesn't happen in the future. But so far, traction has been great. Haven't had any complaints there, and it's been holding up too. Like, it hasn't really, like, there is some wear on some of these lugs, but overall, not anything that I would be concerned about. And if you're looking for a shoe with pretty good traction, this might be a good option. Where it might not be the best is if you are, one, looking for something that you need under really, really sharp, rocky terrain. The rock plate underneath this is, I don't believe it even has much of a rock plate, but you can definitely feel some more jagged, sharp edges. It's not searing pain into the foot, which would be terrible, but it is more noticeable than some of the other shoes that I have worn that have more of a rock plate in them. And then two, if you are more of like in those muddier conditions, you might want something that has that like 7, 8, 10 millimeter lug just to give you that extra traction in those types of trails. So, but for most trail conditions, this is going to be a good all-round option for you for sure. Lastly, let's talk about the ride. Overall, fairly comfortable ride. I know trying on a bunch of other trail shoes, sometimes they can be not the most comfortable when you're just wearing them around the store or if you are on the road or anything like that, right? Because they are a little bit firmer underfoot, because when you are on a trail, it does have that cushioning to it. But these I found were decently comfortable wearing them around the parking lot and that kind of thing. And didn't have any issues there. I felt like the transition from heel to toe was nice and smooth. Just nothing special about it, like just a very traditional running shoe in that sense. And comfortable. They were very comfortable. Like I said, I've taken them out for 6+ hours and didn't feel like I wanted to rip them off when I was finished, which is definitely something to look for in a pair of shoes. And they did still feel responsive on trails as well. So, when you're sort of dipping and diving through different undulations in the trail, it felt really good and comfortable. So no complaints there. Let's give this an overall score. So I would give it an 8 out of 10. Overall, it's a great shoe for me. One, it's a great price point at $100. Go out and get this. If you're just looking to get into trail running or need a new hiker or something like that, this would be a really good option for you. Two, if you have more of that standard width foot, it's going to fit you well too. And They do have a good policy, I believe, if you do need to return it. So if you do order it online, it doesn't fit, you can definitely take it back. And then some other things that I like, the traction, the durability, it's been great. I wouldn't recommend this shoe, like I said, if you do have a little bit of a wider foot, or if you do want waterproofing. It doesn't have any Gore-Tex or any waterproof layers to it, but that's actually what I like. I like the breathability aspect of it. Overall, great shoe. I've enjoyed it. Feel free to let me know in the comments what you think. Other shoes that you would like me to try in the future. Thanks for tuning in. Happy running, everyone. Take care.